More than 12 years after its creation, Bitcoin is just beginning to gain institutional acceptance. It's time we have an informed discussion. The B-Word is a Bitcoin-focused initiative that aims to correct mainstream narratives about Bitcoin, explain how institutions can embrace it, and raise awareness around areas of the network that need to grow. Featuring Cathie Wood, Jack Dorsey, Elon Musk, Lynn Alden, Nick Carter, and many more. Join us in our effort to support the Bitcoin network.
Welcome everybody to the B Word. I'm Steve Lee, the lead of Square Crypto, and I'm here today to moderate a discussion about Bitcoin that will span from what makes it special to its relationship with energy, the community ethos, and the future of Bitcoin. I'm joined by three special guests. The first is Cathie Wood, founder, CEO, and CIO of ARK Invest. Next is Elon Musk, techno king of Tesla and chief engineer of SpaceX. And finally, Jack Dorsey, CEO of Square and CEO of Twitter. So we have a lot to talk about today. So let's get to the talk and get right to it. I'm going to start off by asking each of you a question, which is what's shaped and influenced your views on Bitcoin? And let's start with Cathie.
Okay, Steve, thank you. Well, the first thing was our focus on disruptive innovation. So starting in 2011, Brett Winton, our director of research, who I know will be on the program later, he started talking about this thing called Bitcoin at the time. And it was a curiosity as we were doing our brainstorms in research. But as we learned more about this open source ecosystem, that might fulfill the role of the payment system that the internet neglected to build into the system, not expecting commerce. We thought, this might be something. And then I became even more interested when I realized that my economics would come into play as well here. And Art Laffer, my mentor from USC, and a monetary scholar, in 2014, I asked him if he would collaborate on a paper on Bitcoin. And he was a bit of a naysayer at first, but agreed to read the paper. He read the paper, tore it up, and from an economics point of view, really wanted to understand this. And he said, I think you got something here. This is a rules-based monetary system. I've been waiting for this for my entire career. So the combination of disruptive innovation generally, economics on top of that, and the huge misunderstanding out there as to what this is, that was intriguing and launched our research effort.
Thank you. Elon, what's influenced your views on Bitcoin?
Well, I've thought about money for quite a while, obviously, since the PayPal days. And then the companies that preceded that, X.com, which I created, and Confinity, which Peter Thiel, Max Levchin, Luke Howry, and others created. When we combined the companies and made PayPal. So I've been thinking about money for a long time. And really, I think it's best to think of money as an information system, primarily an information system for labor allocation. For practical purposes, it exists in a series of heterogeneous databases, like very different databases in bank mainframes around the world. It moves quite slowly in reality. It seems to move fast sometimes, and it does with PayPal, which is real time. But the vast majority of the systems out there are batch processing. So the actual reconciliation may take 1 to 5 business days, sometimes longer. And you have the ACH system, which is ancient and still in operation, which allows transfers effectively like a check would be an ACH transfer, but it's not secure. And you've got the credit card systems, which are also not secure. It would be like handing your username and password to a stranger in a restaurant if you buy a meal. So there's definitely an opportunity for something that is better from an information theory standpoint. So and there you can think of it like data on a network. I think is the way to view it. What has the most throughput? What has the least error? What drops the fewest packets? Fraud, for example, being a source of error. And government interference in currencies being a source of error. But it's fundamentally an information system. So I think it makes sense to support something that improves the quality of information with which we conduct the economy. And Bitcoin is a candidate for that. It does, I think, some things well, and it's obviously it's evolving, and there are additional things like Lightning being done on top of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin per se is mostly solving for scarcity, or rather solving for essentially having no throat to choke, decentralized. So there's no one who can be coerced in any way to empty their Bitcoin account. Well, I guess they could technically, but on an individual basis, but the system as a whole cannot. And it has an open ledger, which is also quite good. But transaction volume is low. Transaction cost is high, and usability for the average person is not yet very good. But it has a lot of potential. And I should say that, like, I'm not, and I apologize for taking a long time, but there certainly is a lot to say. In general, I'm a supporter of Bitcoin and the idea of cryptocurrency in general. But as I've said publicly, we do need to watch out for crypto taking, especially Bitcoin, using proof of work to maybe use energy that's maybe a bit too much and not necessarily good for the environment. So, but on balance, I support Bitcoin, and I'm not an investor. The only publicly traded stock I own is Tesla, and the only significant thing I own outside of Tesla is my SpaceX stock that helped create both companies. So, but apart from that, I do own Bitcoin, and Tesla owns Bitcoin, SpaceX owns Bitcoin, and then I do personally own a bit of Ethereum and Dogecoin, of course. So.
Okay, great, thank you. And we'll get into some of those issues in more depth as well. Jack, how about you? What shaped your views of Bitcoin?
The network and the community. It's deeply principled. It's weird as hell. It's always evolving, and it just reminded me of the internet when I was a kid. And I encountered alt cypherpunks when I was fairly young, and this was a topic of discussion for years. I didn't touch it until 2008 when we started Square. Elon and teams at X and PayPal inspired a lot of what we were trying to do, trying to bring in more to a physical world. But we encountered this crazy predatory system that was slow, that was obtuse. And I think, one of the things that we tried to do, which X and PayPal also tried to do, is build an abstraction layer around this complication and around this predatory nature that the financial industry can tend to be, and make it work for people. But when I saw Bitcoin in 2009, you see a chance to replace the whole foundation. And everything that Elon was talking about in terms of ACH and the credit card networks were built with very different agendas in a very different time frame. And it's crazy that they still exist, and they have scaled, but they just are not relevant to today, and they're certainly not relevant to the future, especially when you consider the entire world and countries like Nigeria or Ghana or India, and its interconnection with countries like the United States and Canada and all over Europe. So what really drove my thinking and drives my passion around it is, like, if the internet gets a chance to get a native currency, what will that be? And to me, it's Bitcoin because of those principles, because of that creation story, because of its resilience, because of the number of tests it's been. But what inspires me the most is just the community driving it. It just reminds me of the early internet. It's the only reason that I have a career, because I learned so much from people like who are building Bitcoin today, and I continue to learn in that sense, and I'm so grateful for it.
So that's a good segue into the next question I'd like to ask you, Jack. Is you said before that Bitcoin changes everything. Can you speak more to that?
Well, I just think that a lot of what we experience in life, when you really get down to the foundation, a lot of our monetary policies, a lot of our monetary systems cause so much distraction and so much cost. And when you get to a system where you have the potential for people to truly own it, they can verify it themselves. You don't have to have trust going in. You don't have to trust it at all. You can verify it through source code or whatever your appetite is, and that any particular person can help drive the future of it. And at the same time, it's not controlled by any state. It's not controlled by any bank. It's not controlled by any corporation. And these three parties of people who participate in the network, people who mine, and also the developers, constantly debating the correct roadmap and the way forward, is a beautiful thing. And I don't know of many other consensus-based models that have existed at that scale for this long with this amount of success. And we're still fairly early. So when, I met a woman in Ethiopia 2 years ago, and she was trying to create the lift for Ethiopia. Elon, I think I reached out to you at that time as well, because she really wanted some Teslas. She still has to take paper fiat cash from her passengers and pay all of her drivers in the same way, because there's no monetary system that she can utilize. There's nothing digital. And Africa as a continent is hugely interconnected from a monetary standpoint, but also hugely taxed in that same way. So a lot of the potential that I see, the internet having a native currency helps her build her business in a much faster way. And also, if you consider something like Bitcoin existing before YouTube, before Twitter, before Facebook, a lot of the business models that we have today would not be the same. We would certainly not have the dependency we have upon the advertising business model if Bitcoin existed pre-Twitter. And I think the amount of business models that it enables, the amount of innovation it enables going forward, especially when you can consider the whole internet instead of going country by country by country by country, which you have to whenever you're dealing with finance, it really just opens the aperture. And that is what I want to see in my lifetime, is a currency that is standard and sound for the internet that everyone can use.
Great. A hallmark of Bitcoin is its fixed supply of 21 million coins. Elon referenced that earlier. It may be the first system that humans have created that humans cannot later change. Kathy, I'm curious, with your background in monetary history and macroeconomics, what are your thoughts on that type of system?
Oh, well, I'll recount the story about Art Laffer and our going through the paper. And he said, as I said, first rules-based monetary system, global, ever. This is a very big idea. Once we had convinced him of the ecosystem itself. Now, this is the role that it's playing, given that the rule is a quantity rule, that 21 million units, is really a store of value role. So there are three roles of money. Store of value, very important. The means of exchange, so for transactions, and the unit of account. Every good priced in terms of whatever the unit is. So store of value is it's primary use right now. The others exist. Unit of account, reserve currency of the crypto asset ecosystem, that's being seeded a little bit towards stable coins right now. But the store of value is a very big role, and means of exchange with apps built on top of the Bitcoin blockchain, we think is going to become more of a reality. Right now, high value transactions take place over Bitcoin, and that is a very useful role. So we look at those, and I remember saying to Art, "How big could this be?" And he said, "Well, how big is the U.S. monetary base?" Well, today it's $8 trillion. $8 trillion. At the time we were talking, it was $4 trillion. So we've gone through another crisis since then. And so this store of value, this idea that purchasing power will go up over time if demand rises relative to supply ultimately fixed at 21 million units. That's a very good thing. Purchasing power going up globally around the world. And this idea that it's a hedge against confiscation of wealth. And that can take place in a myriad of ways. But inflation, and especially hyperinflation in emerging markets, is the primary way. Talk about destroying purchasing power. So that's a very big idea. And I'll also mention deflation. In some ways, it's a hedge against deflation. I know some people are confused that we at ARC think that we're in a deflationary environment here in the United States. If that is true, the odds of a hyperinflation in the rest of the world, especially in emerging markets, is also true. So, but this deflation, and we learned from 08, 09, there's counterparty risk associated with deflation. And I think Bitcoin would be a hedge against that eventuality as well. So it's a very big idea.
Right. I suspect among us, there's not a lot of debate about Bitcoin's potential as a store of value. But Jack, you referenced earlier it being or becoming the native currency of the internet. Can you speak more to that, and also how it relates to maybe how institutions think about it?
Yeah, I mean, like just simple example. If I happen to be in Ghana and my family is in Nigeria, currently I can take anywhere from and I need to send money back, anywhere from 10 to 30% off the top just to send that money back. Whereas if you just focus on the worldwide remittance problem, Bitcoin solves so many of those problems today instantly without having to go through any intermediaries or any slowness or complicated systems that a corporation or a state created. So I think having sound money that is separate from the state is the idea. Having it completely verifiable by everyone, including the state, including corporations, including individuals, including developers who want to build on top of it, is quite powerful, and that's what keeps it secure and strong. And I think that's we need more of that, which is why one of the reasons why this conversation is so important is as entities come into the space, it's not just buying an asset and holding on to an asset and treating it as an investment. There's something special that created this, and something precious and something very unique, which has to be protected, and we need to do whatever we can to help that thrive as well.
Elon, I'm curious your opinion on this. You mentioned earlier about Bitcoin's throughput, or the importance of throughput, maybe some concerns around Bitcoin. Can you speak? Do you think Bitcoin can become peer-to-peer cash?
Well, Bitcoin does have a fundamental scarcity limit at the base layer that's designed in. That doesn't mean you can't have some layer 2 system in theory like Lightning. And I understand Lightning is doing well in some small countries. There's some question mark as to whether you need a money transmitter license. Just a debate as to whether that's needed, given that it is not open ledger. So that's a whole separate debate, of course. But Bitcoin by itself simply cannot scale to be the monetary system for the world at base layer but with a second layer, this is possible depending upon how that second layer is implemented. Yeah, that's part of why I think there may be some merit to something that may seem silly, like Ethereum, like Dogecoin. I think Ethereum also, like I said, the three things I own outside of SpaceX and Tesla, and also obviously it's a Neuralink and Boring Company, but of any significance are Bitcoin by far, and then some Ethereum and some Doge. So if the price of Bitcoin goes down, I lose money. I'm not sort of, I might pump, but I don't dump. So, it's not a case of, I definitely do not believe in getting the price high and selling or anything like that. And I would like to see Bitcoin succeed. I think there's some merit to, this is not a slam on Bitcoin, there's some merit to considering something that has higher max transaction rates and a lower transaction cost, and kind of seeing how far you could take a single layer network where the exchanges act as a de facto second layer. I think you can probably take that further than people realize, and as bandwidth increases over time, latency decreases. SpaceX's Starlink is actually playing a role in this, and I think long term people will probably have access to worldwide access to gigabit level connectivity at low latency, and so at low cost. And so then your base layer could do a lot of transactions if you take that into account. So yeah, but like I said, Bitcoin with a layer 2 system certainly could scale to do a vast number of transactions. Same goes for Ethereum.
Question about the scaling at the layer 1. The concern from the past 5 years of debate in the Bitcoin community is that would sacrifice too much decentralization and hurt the censorship-resistant properties of Bitcoin. I'm curious if what are your thoughts on that? Are you sensitive to that? And are you concerned about losing some of the special properties of Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency by scaling at layer 1?
Yeah, I mean, these things are, it's helpful to use the physics tools of thinking and say, scale up, scale down, and see if it still makes sense. So if scaling up the transaction block doesn't make sense, why don't you scale it down? And have it be, so that somebody, with a laptop from 2008 can still run a Bitcoin node. Why not slow it down? Oh, you want to slow it down? Well, maybe you're at the wrong number then.
there's actually there's members in the community that do want to slow it down, but I understand your point.
It's silly. The reality is the average person is not going to run a Bitcoin node. So this is and Bitcoin. It was a lot of clever ideas, but these parameters were set. I don't know in 2008 or something, maybe 2009. And there's been some improvements since then, but not a lot. So, it's sort of like there was still in 2008 there was still a non-trivial number of people on modems. So, now it is quite common to get 100 megabit connection just for a house. Some houses have gigabit connections. So, and that trend is obviously in the direction of higher bandwidth and lower latency. And if somebody else doesn't do it, Starlink certainly will. So I have high confidence that you will be able to maintain a decentralized finance system while still having a much bigger blockchain, aka ASCII text ledger, a hash ledger. You can make the hash ledger bigger without suffering from decentralization as the average connectivity improves, obviously.
One idea would be to to put a Bitcoin full node in Starlink terminals. That way more people would be running it.
Actually, I have run this by the team at one point. I had this idea, which is kind of off the wall, but like, let's say you need a little space heater, and normally your space heater would just be pure entropy. Well, what if that space heater was also a Bitcoin, Ethereum, Doge mining node? Pick your currency, and so then you'd be heated up, and you would also mine your crypto, and have connectivity in one.
I love that idea.
Yeah, I mean, better than running a space heater.
Absolutely. Are there any other, so you're drawn to Dogecoin a little bit. Are there any other gaps in Bitcoin that you see that cause you to be drawn towards Dogecoin?
Oh, I think, I mean, I think there's Doge has the Doge community, I think, is somewhat irreverent, obviously, and has great memes and loves dogs, and I love dogs and memes, and it doesn't take itself too seriously, and I think there's Occam's razor, which is the simplest answer is the most likely. It's a summary of Occam's razor. The simplest answer is the most likely one. Then there's a friend of mine came up with a variant on that the most ironic outcome is the most likely one. And then I have a variant on that, which is the most entertaining outcome is the most likely one. So if that is true, then the most ironic and entertaining outcome would be that the cryptocurrency that was started as a joke to make fun of cryptocurrencies ends up being the leading cryptocurrency. That would be the most ironic outcome.
Jack, what are your thoughts on that? Is Bitcoin resilient enough to overcome that?
I think it's resilient, but also I think like you find, I mean, that's what attracts me to Bitcoin in the first place is the irreverence. A lot of that just brings it forward, and at first go it makes it a little bit inaccessible, but as people get into it, it makes it more accessible and more spreadable. And I absolutely think the resilience is there. I think it's important to have fun as well. And anyway folks can express themselves. I think that goes back to the main idea of like how do we create a native currency for the internet? Anything that goes towards that path, like that's whatever wackiness or fun we can have along the way. That's going to make it a lot more enjoyable, and it's going to make a lot more people want to use it.
I'd also point out there's nothing stopping someone from creating a Bitcoin wallet that's like fun and has memes, has dogs. That's possible as well. Great. Let's move on.
Right now at this point.
Let's move on to the next topic, which is Bitcoin and energy. It's a really hot topic that lots of people are talking about. Let's start with Elon. You've been vocal on this. You've said that. I mean, you said many things about it. You've also said that Tesla will resume payments in Bitcoin payments if the renewable energy is approximately 50% and sort of looks like it's on a positive future trend. What do you think the state of things are with respect to that?
Yeah, so I do think that there appears to be a positive trend in the energy usage of Bitcoin. Actually, part of this is due to the drop in Bitcoin price. I mean, what I observed, or what I thought I was seeing, there may be some disagreements on this, but from when Tesla announced that it had acquired Bitcoin and was doing Bitcoin transactions, there was a massive run-up in the Bitcoin price, and also a massive increase in the amount of energy used to mine Bitcoin. And I think I understand renewable energy quite a bit. I mean, Tesla does solar and interacts with a lot of wind generation through our mega pack, because basically you need to store energy from wind and from solar. So we're pretty plugged into the renewable energy industry. And there's just no way that you could basically double or triple the amount of energy in such a short period of time with renewables. You could shovel coal that fast. And so I was like, look, this is too sketchy. Tesla's mission is accelerating the advent of sustainable energy. we can't be the company that does that and also not do appropriate diligence on the energy usage of Bitcoin. So, so all I did was I said, look, we're going to suspend Bitcoin transactions for now. We're not selling any Bitcoin, nor am I selling anything personally, or nor is SpaceX selling any Bitcoin. Again, I want to emphasize, SpaceX, Tesla, and I own Bitcoin. I also own a little bit of Ethereum and Doge, but the companies just own Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin that I own is worth much more than the Ethereum or Doge. So clearly, if I'm if these actions negatively affect me financially, if I was purely financially motivated, then I would not express this reticence about Bitcoin energy usage. Now, it looks like Bitcoin is shifting a lot more towards renewables, and a bunch of the heavy-duty coal plants that were being used, unequivocally being used, this is not a question mark, have been shut down, especially in China. So I think it's probably, we want to do a little bit more diligence to confirm confirm that the percentage of renewable energy usage is most likely sort of at or above 50%, and that there is a trend towards increasing that number, and if so, then Tesla will resume Bitcoin, accepting Bitcoin. So I think we want to just do a little bit more diligence, and I think, but most likely the answer is that Tesla would resume accepting Bitcoin, most likely.
That's
Steve,
great to hear. I would agree with that. Kathy?
Yeah, may I ask a question? Elon, I'm not quite sure if you saw the paper that Square and ARC did together on making Bitcoin mining a part of a utility, a broad-based utility ecosystem, whereby, the overage from sunshine or wind powers the Bitcoin mining machine, thereby enabling the proliferation of renewables to a much faster extent, or at a faster rate than otherwise would be the case. What do you think of that?
Well, the problem is that in order to operate so-called mining or hashing rigs, in order to operate a bunch of hashing rigs, effectively, you have to run them 24/7, which means you need base load. You can do that with solar and wind plus battery, but if you only did it based on solar wind overage, your hashing rig utilization would be much less. So you'd be at a disadvantage.
Sure,
hydro or geothermal are great as renewable means. I'm also pro nuclear. I think modern nuclear power plants are safe, contrary to what people may think. I really think it's possible to make very, very extremely safe nuclear. I'm talking about fission. You don't need fusion. And then, of course, fusion. You just got that big fusion reactor in the sky called the sun. It comes up every day. But I think a combination of solar and wind plus stationary storage will get you that base load, so you can run hashing 24/7.
Jack, I'm curious. You've stated that Bitcoin incentivizes renewable energy. That's what we're talking about now. Do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, everything that Elon said and Kathy mentioned, but it's also incentivizing a lot of innovation in just energy space, and just like looking at unused energy. There's a company called Great American Mining that caps the methane flares on oil fields to power their rigs. And you just imagine, and you mentioned nuclear, Elon, as well, and just imagine all the unused energy that is just being wasted every single day. And being able to get that energy and converting it into a secure, sound money system for the planet feels like a worthy trade-off. And that's the sort of incentive that I think is most powerful, is like, how do we reuse what is being currently just dumped on the ground and wasted and not considered, and how do we do that at scale? And I think that's a bigger conversation that I think is missing. But I agree with everything that Elon has said, and also the paper we put forth.
I'm curious if any of you have thoughts on how what the industry can do to accelerate the transition to renewable energy. And like Elon specifically, could Tesla Energy or Starlink play a role?
Well, I think Tesla can play a role. Tesla's literal reason for existence. The reason I've put so much of my life energy into Tesla, which is a lot. In fact, I would say that I've had some pretty tough life experiences, and Tesla is responsible for probably 2/3 of all personal and professional pain combined. Just to give you a sense of perspective there. So this is a hella hard situation. But we do solar, commercial solar, solar retrofit, as well as the solar roof. And we make consumer battery packs called Powerwall for houses and small businesses. And then the utility scale, which are gigantic. We've done now a number of gigawatt hour installations. That's a lot. That's a lot. And a lot of them actually have been for load leveling the grid. Mostly they are. And combined with the first really big one we did, which is 100 megawatt installation in Australia. That's actually helped stabilize a huge portion of the South Australian grid because it's able to react so fast. In fact, at first, because they've got a billing system in Australia that I think works at the sort of millisecond level, and we were operating at the microsecond level. So the system was operating so fast that the measuring system couldn't see it. But so Tesla's certainly doing a lot to enable renewables, especially wind and solar. And in fact, the limiting factor for us right now is cell production. So we need to both internally get the Tesla internal battery cells produced, as well as increase supply from suppliers. Generally, when I talk to our suppliers and they say, how many cells would you like us? How many cells can you make? Because sometimes they're concerned, is Tesla going to compete with them on cells? I'm like, no. If you want to make the cells, be our guest. It's just that we need a crazy number of batteries, and they need to be done. It obviously needs to be mined and produced and manufactured in an ethical and environmentally sound way. So, at Tesla, we really do aspire to be the good guys, to be a company that people can believe in. That doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, but that's what we try. So, but I think generally hydro, especially existing hydro, is good for mining. Geothermal, there's lots of places in the world that have geothermal energy. Like I said, nuclear is also good. I think just I'm like as I said earlier, the expectation is not that the energy production must be pure as the driven snow, but it must it can't be using. It also cannot be using the world's dirtiest coal, which it was for a moment there. That's just difficult for Tesla to support in that situation. So I think. But I do think long-term renewable energy will actually be the cheapest form of energy. It just doesn't happen overnight. But as long as there is a conscious and determined and real effort by the mining community to move towards renewables, then obviously Tesla can support that.
That's great. Kathy, we've been talking a lot about energy, but many institutions are facing questions around Bitcoin's relationship with ESG. Can you maybe speak a little bit more to what is S and G in ESG and how Bitcoin might support those?
Sure. So E, of course, is environmental, S is social, and G is governance. And there is a massive movement afoot in the institutional world, especially, to embrace ESG, and make sure that their asset managers are doing the same. So if you we've just talked about environmental, and I really do believe that Bitcoin will be much more environmentally friendly, certainly than traditional gold mining or the traditional financial services sector. In many ways, it already is, and it's just going to get better that way. In terms of social, I know that many institutions, when they are thinking of social, they think of diversity and equity, pay equity, and all of that. But if from our point of view, the disruptive innovation point of view, social is much more than that. It is saving lives, of course, autonomous technology, that would be another topic for Elon. But in this case, allowing access to payment technology, as Jack is saying, everywhere around the world without friction. And just back to the remittance example, I think if I've got these stats correctly, there are certain countries in the world that are incredibly dependent on remittances for GDP. Tonga, 37%, El Salvador, which just deemed Bitcoin legal currencies, 24%, Nepal, 24%. And I think the remittance industry globally, roughly 700 billion. So saving people these egregious fees, think about it, you're paying anywhere from 8% to, as Jack said, 30% of your $100 that you're sending back to your family. That is a social responsibility, I would submit, as is just the economic empowerment that Bitcoin will enable. We've talked about that already. And I know that Alex Gladstein is going to be talking later about, the 4.3 billion people in the world who are hostage to authoritarian regimes. Not more. Saving them from the destruction of their purchasing power certainly is a noble social goal. So we expand social to be much more than the traditional ESG community. And then on governance, you've got the transparency of the ecosystem. It's completely transparent, unlike the opaqueness of financial systems and the toll takers in the traditional financial world. And I think a huge part of governance in the Bitcoin ecosystem are the Bitcoin core developers. Now, before I met them, and I've had the pleasure and the honor of meeting many of them, that was a part of this ecosystem I didn't understand, but actually getting to sit down and talk to them. If I have a learning curve need, it certainly is on the technology side. But in terms of talking to them about economics, economic theory, failed monetary regimes historically, they know economic history, many of them, better than anyone I've ever met. So that gives me a great degree of confidence that, they do believe they are on a noble mission. They could be paid a lot more than they're being paid right now if they worked at Google or Facebook or some of these other areas. But they've chosen, this sense of purpose for a noble goal. And they have incredibly strong technology backgrounds. As well as a good understanding of economic history, especially monetary history. And it gives me a great deal of comfort as I think about the governance of the ecosystem, much more so than I think we would find in other financial ecosystems. And just to give you an example of that, I think 2 years, we were talking about there's a big debate about reorganizations, I know, in the Ethereum network right now. Well, we saw the core Bitcoin developers and others at work back in 2019 when Binance tried to reorganize in order to reclaim 7,000 Bitcoin that were hacked. And they just wouldn't allow it. So we've already had some very good tests of the Bitcoin ecosystem, including developers. So that would be my answer.
Thank you. And it's a great transition to the next topic area, which is Bitcoin Ethos. And what is Bitcoin Ethos? I mean, Bitcoin was born as open source and it's very transparent. There's also a staunch defense from the community around decentralization and a lot of the core principles of Bitcoin. So let's talk a little bit about that and what makes it special. Jack, Square has done a lot to support open source Bitcoin. Can you tell us a little bit about what Square has done and what advice you'd have for other institutions looking to follow in its footsteps?
Yeah, I mean, I was very skeptical of corporations when I was a kid, and I'm still skeptical of corporations today. And as we've used corporations to be, they've been great vessels for what we need to do and the ideas that we need to bring to the world. But Bitcoin is not that. And when we were considering Bitcoin and how Square intersected, I was really concerned with how we don't disrupt the community in a negative way, how we promote what is amazing about it, and how we help it grow in that way, in the way that it wants to. So we created your team, Steve, which is Square Crypto, which is hiring open source developers to work on whatever they want and whatever they think is most important to help Bitcoin. We created an organization called Copo, which we gave up all of our crypto patents so that the community can use them in defense against trolls and some crazy characters we won't name. And we continue to find ways that, following that Bitcoin path, we're going to create a hardware wallet. We're probably going to do a lot more in hardware. Everything that we do in the space is going to be completely open source, from the hardware design to the software, taking in the community's push. And we're building a developer platform as well, in the same open development, open source, and completely transparent. So I think as institutions or companies like ours consider getting in the space, I think contribution back to the community is important. Tesla did this with accepting payments for Tesla and finding security holes and improving the stack. And as I said before, we can't just see this as an asset that we own and an investment vehicle. This is something that has the potential to change everything and make the lives of everyone on this planet better in some small, maybe marginal way, but those margins will be meaningful as they compound over time.
Great. Elon, you've tweeted before that any wallet that doesn't give the user their private key should be avoided at all costs. Can you tell us more about why is that important, and how does what's its relationship with decentralization?
Well, it's difficult to say that if you own crypto in an exchange and the exchange does not give you your private keys, it's not clear that you own anything. I mean, if there's something that, if that exchange breaks or is hacked or or is subject to seizure by the government or something like that, your crypto is gone. So in order to actually have a properly decentralized finance, which I'm a fan of, I think it makes sense. Then you have to own your private keys, and you should be the only one who has your private keys. So if you're the only one who has the private keys, then you own it. If someone else has your private keys, effectively they own it too, and the security of your crypto is then dependent upon them or any entity that can affect them. So yeah, I think what Jack's doing sounds like a good idea to have a hardware wallet that's the only thing that contains your private keys. I think that's like in terms of sort of empowering the people, which I very much believe in. Then I think you want to have people have their own wallets and be the only ones that have the private keys to that wallet, so-called wallet, the other side of the of the crypto.
Right. I agree, and I think I think we'll see an emergence too of new solutions that use multi-sig, like with a 2 of 3 keys, where the user has 2 keys, and then you get assisted custody by having an institution hold a 3rd key. Can be a good solution as well.
Yeah. Well, you can just put your private key in something that has dual access or voting access as an application on an existing network.
Right. So the Bitcoin community is known for staunchly defending Bitcoin's principles. Sometimes it can be rude and aggressive, but I think what it stems from is just a desire to not have wealthy or powerful people or institutions negatively impacting Bitcoin or sort of changing the rules in favor of them. I'm curious to hear from each of you what role you feel like you and your own institutions, your own companies, what role can you play in Bitcoin, and how do you positively impact it without having these negative drawbacks? Kathy, maybe start with you.
Sure. Yes. Well, ARC has stood for 2 things: democratization and transparency. We're the closest you'll find to a venture capital fund in the public equity markets, and I kind of feel that Bitcoin, or we have Bitcoin's DNA from that point of view. One of the things in terms of democratization is education. We have one of our missions, values, is to educate, and I do believe that that some of Yassine El-Mandra's white papers — Yassine's our lead crypto analyst, who's worked very closely with you, Steve, on this conference — are helping the cause. We've done, and not only for retail investors, we found that we had to do a bit more when it came to institutional investors, just because of the way that they invest and the way they like to receive information. So just like in our investments, we've been the retail community has been more attracted to us first, and now the institutional community is coming along. So I do think our transparency of research, especially in the social world, social media, pushing our research out for free to anyone, is part of our way of helping the community. And I do think encouraging, and this is something that Jack just said, I would encourage the support of the Bitcoin core developer community. As I said before, it's amazing to me, having gotten to know some of them, how strong their sense of purpose is here. And so we'd like to be helpful in making that happen as well.
That's great. Jack, how about you? How do you view your own personal role and the companies you run?
I think my own personal role through the companies I run is to really push for more decentralization, like at everything that we intend to do with the wallet, being non-custodial, building a developer platform, focusing on non-custodial solutions. On the Square side is important, being completely open development and open source. But I also think it's important on the Twitter side as well. My biggest focus right now is on a decentralized social media protocol. We're calling it Blue Sky. It's super, super early, but we've learned a lot from what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin and why that's important. I've learned a lot in that sense as well. And I think, just continuing to push on that thread and show it with our actions every single day in support of this community that's taught me so much and I think will benefit so many people. That's what I'm focused on.
What about letting Twitter advertisers pay in crypto?
Yeah, I think enabling anyone. As you know, Elon, if we had Bitcoin or native currency for the internet before Twitter started, it just creates so many different business models that we wouldn't have to be so dependent upon advertising generally. And
Sure.
I do believe that, that we have them, any form of payment that they want to use, we should be able to take. So absolutely, but I'm more focused on like how do we create economic incentives in the network itself without having to rely on advertising.
Yeah, it's just that the money has to come off of the crypto so-called coins, the hash strings, have to come off and get translated into real products and services. So the more sort of off-ramps there are to real products and services, even at the institutional level, although I mean there are certainly many small advertisers on Twitter, it seems like accepting Bitcoin, maybe some other cryptos for advertising payments on Twitter would be supportive of Bitcoin.
100%, and also looking at just general commerce through Twitter itself.
That would be great. Sorry, what, Elon?
I was asking Jack if he's going to do it.
Oh. Can we get a product announcement today? Elon, how about you? You obviously you're a big personality on Twitter. What are your thoughts on your role and your company's role in Bitcoin and sort of preserving the ethos?
Yeah, I mean, I generally think we should do things that benefit the people as a whole and increase the probability that the future is good. So, I think to me, it just seems self-evident that we should kind of take these set of actions most likely to make the future good. And I think probably crypto or some of the cryptocurrencies will make the future better, most likely. It's not, I always think of these things in terms of probabilities, but I think it's probably better for there to be a prosperous Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin, maybe some others in the future. And I think it can have an empowering effect for individuals and increase the power of the individual relative to government. And really, if you think of government is just a corporation in the limit. So sometimes some people are like against corporations but for government. It's like, guys, government is just a corporation in the limit. It's the biggest corporation of all, and it's got a monopoly on violence. So if you don't like corporations, you should really hate government.
There you go. All right. We got about, we'll try to wrap up in 10 minutes. So let's move on to future of Bitcoin. So Tesla and Square have both put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Kathy, I'm curious to hear from you. What advice would you have for other institutions looking to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet?
Well, I guess the first piece of advice is, just make sure, and I actually learned this after both Square and Tesla put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. The Bitcoin is being treated as an intangible asset. And so we need to get FASB to reconsider this, because with an intangible asset, if the asset goes up in price, it can't be marked up on their books. But if it goes down, it must be marked down. So, there's some asymmetry there, which is, we need to change that given what we believe Bitcoin is. And I do believe if, I'll harken back to something, well, it was either Elon or Jack said, think about it, you take away the boundaries, the different currencies, just think about how explosive growth could be and how wide-reaching taking the friction out of the system could be. So I would encourage corporations to think about that this ability to do business anywhere in the world, ultimately, obviously, we're paving the way here. That's certainly a consideration. It also will serve as a hedge against inflation, especially, and as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of emerging markets that are suffering from significant inflation. In other words, the purchasing power of those populations is going down. So they are going to migrate to to Bitcoin and other ways to preserve purchasing power. And again, being able to sell to them in that kind of currency would be very useful. I'd also suggest, once again, this idea of deflation, I think, is going to be a real thing. There's going to be good deflation caused by innovation, so demand will boom because of that. There's going to be bad deflation because so many companies out there have not been investing enough in innovation. Their products are going to go obsolete, as you know, and they're going to be stuck trying to service the debt that they piled on because their shareholders wanted profits and wanted them now. So they leveraged up to buy back their shares and pay dividends, and so I think that's going to be the source of bad deflation and counterparty risk. And we learned from 0809 that counterparty risk can be devastating. Almost cataclysmic. So a hedge against that as well, I think, would be another reason to do it.
Great.
Yeah, it's funny. It kind of like Tesla's bank balances in Europe have negative interest rate. It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, if you've got like 2% inflation on 1% interest, you're technically minus 1% return. But nonetheless, it is quite annoying to just see your bank balance drop in real time in Europe. Europe has negative interest rates. This is insane.
Yeah. Paying the banks, paying the banks to hold
the bank to keep your money. I'm like, what?
It is crazy.
Like, what? We should definitely move that into Bitcoin.
I believe Ray Dalio said, "Buy Bitcoin and not bonds." So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jack, you've talked about design being an underfunded area in Bitcoin, and Elon earlier mentioned, usability could improve a lot. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. What do you see as the future of how can design impact Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Bitcoin network is beautifully designed as a protocol in the way it works. I mean, it went after a single problem, and it does in an absolutely astounding way. But I think the endpoints of people getting into it is still a little bit confusing. So I think the more energy we spend on wallets and making sure that the wallets are simple and accessible and they're non-custodial as well. Yeah. I think the best example of this that I know of is probably this wallet called Moon. And it's just simple, straightforward. It's it does an amazing thing with key management that my mom and friends new to Bitcoin can understand. Does amazing in storage, and it also has a very clever implementation of Lightning, so that you can use it in a transactional way without having to think about it, just with QR codes in a way that makes sense. So more work like that, I think, really brings us forward.
Great. Let's wrap things up with a final question for each of you. I guess what is your hope for Bitcoin? How it can impact the world? Let's see, Elon, do you want to start with that? So what's your hope? What's your hope for Bitcoin?
Well, my hope for I guess crypto in general is that it can improve the efficiency of the information system that we call money. So if the core efficiency of money is improved and and money has less error, where, like I said, error is like in any kind of government interference or fraud or anything like that, this will naturally lead to basically a better standard of living and more power to the individual, which I very much agree with.
Great. Kathy?
Yeah, and I would segue from what Elon just said is, money has powerful network effect qualities. And so, we talked about ESG earlier. I think that, of course, that aspiration, having, this money be the best from an ESG point of view, that's really talking about solving some of the world's problems right now, which we definitely want to do. But I also am very excited about this idea of network effect and the convergence of blockchain technology and artificial intelligence from a technology point of view. I think, think about the internet in the earliest days. We couldn't imagine what was going to happen, but the impetus to growth was pretty incredible. So I am looking at this rules-based monetary policy, making for better lives around the world, as we've just said. But I'm also looking at the technology itself and the convergence between blockchain technology and artificial intelligence, to change the world in ways that we cannot imagine right now, solving even more problems, but creating more opportunities as well, which is the history of technology and disruptive innovation.
Jack, what's your hope for Bitcoin?
My hope is that it creates world peace, or helps create world peace. I mean, Elon said it earlier. Like, we have all these monopolies of violence, and the individual doesn't have power. And the amount of cost and distraction that comes from our monetary system today is real, and it takes away attention from the bigger problems. Some of the bigger problems that Elon is trying to solve, like get us to a multi-planetary humanity. All these distractions that we have to deal with on a daily basis take away from those bigger goals that affect every single person on this planet, increasingly so. So it may sound a little bit ridiculous, but like you fix that foundational level and everything above it improves in such a dramatic way. So it's going to be long term, but my hope is definitely peace.
That's fantastic. Well, I'd like to thank all three of you for giving us your time today. It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you to the audience for tuning in. The B word is not just this discussion, but we have a lineup of incredible speakers and content. So I encourage everyone to check it out. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
than having your own commit, but it's incredibly important, and that's a way that you can get started, is trying to just be constructive and helpful in terms of reviewing code and making comments. Again, I think you'll find the developer community to be quite welcoming.
Well, code review is so important because we have a system here where we can't have any chargebacks. If you make a mistake or there's an error, we all risk losing our money. So, I mean, it's probably one of the most important jobs in the ecosystem because bugs can be critical. So, okay, another area I wanted to ask you about. You've been quite close to the developers for quite some time and how they're funded. How have you seen that evolve over the last 4 to 5 years?
Well, so as I said, we've got tons of new things. So we didn't, like, what did we not have? So I guess 4 or 5 years ago, as you pointed out, there was, in terms of the major polls, there was chain code, Blockstream, and all this fantastic, MIT DCI, and you had obviously some independent developers. You had some developers employed by companies like Zappo, Vince's company, and so forth. And that's continued, but now we have many more developers being funded by exchanges, and, to work on Bitcoin, to work on what they want to do, whether on the payroll or through grants. But we also have Human Rights Foundation, we have Brink, we have Bitcoin Optech, different focuses, and others. I mean, it's not an exhaustive list that have sprung up. And I think that combination of new organizations with just more grants going on from companies in a lot of the grants, and then the organizations are often very philanthropic, is a lot better. And I think you put your finger on it. If I had to, there's so many different ways it could go, and frankly, part of the point is everybody should find their own way, and no one should dictate it. But if I personally had to say what I love to see now develop would be more, more Brinks, more chain codes, and so forth in different geographies, with different perspectives.
Well, it's an interesting evolution, right? From an original group of decentralized developers to some kind of structure around those, to having essential charitable institution managing devs, to onboarding people, to now distributing those around. But there's even an imperative just to talk about it. I mean, if I make a show about funding developers, it would be one of my lower performing shows because people don't really want to hear about that. They want to hear the moon talk. But I even feel like I have an imperative not just to contribute myself, but to even talk about it, to have John Newbery on the show. I'm actually going to be doing what happened is when I interviewed John at Chaincode, did a 15-minute interview with Amiti, who you probably know,
yes,
Carla, and Fabian, the three of them, for 15 minutes. They're all now working on Bitcoin development. So we're going to do a reunion show, and they're going to be talking about their experience. But I feel like us podcasters, the journalists, everybody in the space has a duty to cover this, to make it a topic that never leaves, that would never, because John, the real question is what is the maximum amount of funding we need for developers?
Wow, gosh, that's how long is a piece of string? That's a really good question.
Exactly.
I think, interestingly, there's probably a balance. Bitcoin, in theory, so Bitcoin, protocol stability is really important, right? I mean, sorry. I didn't mean that in that. Without a doubt, protocol stability is very important, and therefore, in theory, there is an upper bound to just how much change you want and how much time, and therefore how many different inputs, and as a consequence, maybe somewhere how much funding. I don't think we're there. I mean, I think that we're still in a place on the curve where more funding and more developers, especially more, increasingly diversity developers, geographic and otherwise, would be beneficial. But there is an upper bound. I don't think interestingly, it doesn't take crazy numbers. It's not like we need 10 times more would be my guess. I mean, I didn't get 10 times more. I don't know. It could even be counterproductive. It's not an order of magnitude of increase, but we need to maintain what we've got, and we could probably, I don't know, double it, triple it, but
that's interesting because
without things getting out of control. Sorry.
But that's interesting because I thought you'd say there's never an amount, there's too much, but perhaps you're right.
Well,
and another thing I would just,
yeah.
I mean, another thing I would say is interesting, just as somebody who's made small donations myself, is that it's given me an imperative to learn more about developers and development, and ultimately, therefore, increase my knowledge of Bitcoin. And I'm assuming it's done the same for you.
Well, for sure. I mean, I've learned so much through getting to know developers and what they're working on, following their work. You know, the whole point of it is I have no influence on what they do, but I learn so much, and it gives me a chance also when I don't understand something. I know who to call. I can say, can you explain this to me? Why is this important? What does it mean? And it's incredibly enriching, and it's just fascinating. There's so many. Bitcoin is fascinating, and the more you get into the detail, actually, the more fascinating it gets.
Yeah, I can agree more. The last 5 years of my life have just been the most incredible journey of learning, and I take a long time to learn these things. I also think it's quite funny after knowing you for 3 to 4 years. This is the first time I've actually interviewed you, John, which is
I know
hilarious.
We've been talking about it.
I can't believe. I know, and here we are. Well, listen, look,
here we are.
We're getting close to the end of close to the end of the session. If you wanted to say one last thing to, who've got skin in the game, they've got Bitcoin, they've never actually supported the ecosystem of developers yet. You want to say one last thing to them and point them in a direction? Let's do that now.
Well, I would say, first of all, just like getting off zero with Bitcoin is the first step, right? That owning zero Bitcoin is the wrong answer. And then it's a question of scaling. And similarly, I think if you care about Bitcoin, whatever your focus, development is key. You should, I think, seriously consider making a contribution. If you know how to code and you're passionate about it, maybe do it as a developer. Or if you know how to code and you feel like you want to organize something, go start up a chain code or Brink India, et cetera, as you suggested. If like me, you don't have any particular skills or talent, but you have the ability to provide funding, get started. And I think the easiest way to do it is via the organized charities, some of which we mentioned earlier. And through that, you'll begin to learn and network and find your way around. And as you do that, I'm sure everyone will find her or his own way to focus and who they want to support and so forth. But that's probably the easiest thing to do out of the box.
Cool. Well, I'll finish off a little bit more direct. If you've got big Bitcoin funds, especially if you're a company in the Bitcoin space and you're not sponsoring developers, you really need to pull your finger out. If I'm giving more money than you, then that's an embarrassment. Pull your finger out, support developers. And I also think, look, check out Brink because they are newer. Check out a Human Rights Foundation, Alex Gladstein, because they're also newer. They're doing some great work. John, always love seeing you. Hopefully I'll see you again in person this year, and appreciate your time in this. And also, look, just a massive thanks for everything you've done for Bitcoin as well, and the money in to support developers, and appreciate you, man.
And thank you for all you're doing, and glad to see you back on your feet.
Thanks, brother. Cheers. Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Jonas from Chain Code Labs, the head of special projects, and I have the pleasure of speaking with folks across the ecosystem who are supporting open source Bitcoin developers and contributors. So let me introduce you to some of our panelists. Hong.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hong. I am CEO of OKCoin. Nice to meet you all.
And Beth.
Hi, Beth Curtison here, Managing Director at Gemini.
And Connor.
Hello, I'm Connor Okas, Product Manager at Square Crypto.
Great. So we have a lot to get to in a short period of time. So let's start with Hong. And as the CEO of a global exchange, you have a ton on your plate. And yet, whenever I see you make an appearance, you're talking about the importance of Bitcoin developer funding. And so given your previous experience in traditional finance, and more specifically Goldman Sachs, I guess I'm wondering where you got that passion to support this ecosystem and support open source Bitcoin developers.
Yeah, so for us, Bitcoin, investing in Bitcoin open source development is investing in the future of the industry. At OKCoin, we try to build the platform where people can come in and buy and sell crypto. But by the end of the day, Bitcoin is the first money of freedom that we have ever seen in our history of humanity. And for that money to be free, it is super important and critical to keep the code free, i.e. not free at no charge, but free as open to everyone, right? Being transparent, encourage the free communication and exchanges of ideas, being transparent to everyone, being open to everyone for audit. So, for us to be able to invest in that foundation of our industry is critical. We are a participant in the industry. We are benefiting from the growth of the industry. We think that it's important investing in it and supporting the growth long term.
Wonderful. And Connor, you were a recipient of a grant from Steve Lee and the team at Square Crypto not that long ago, and now you've been tasked to take the reins of that very same program. So could you describe what it was like going through that process a little bit, and also how you see the program remaining the same or possibly changing on your direction?
Yeah, sure. So like you mentioned, I was a recipient of a Square Crypto grant. So initially I was kind of just volunteering in the Bitcoin space, helping to organize a conference in London, volunteering to help sort of educate newbies about Bitcoin. And I have a software engineering background. And so I've been working at kind of startups and large corporations, but I wanted to always kind of transition to working on Bitcoin full time. As you do, you kind of go down a rabbit hole and you get very passionate and you kind of look for ways to work on Bitcoin full time. And so the Bitcoin design community came about, and I kind of wanted to use my skills and the knowledge that I was building up over the last few years to just try and contribute as positively as I could. And so the opportunity arose for me to kind of put a proposal forward in terms of what I would want to contribute to the space. And so I worked on a whole host of different projects, from contributing to the Bitcoin design guide to contributing to a developer library to help make private key management easier, podcasting, an educational platform called Hello Bitcoin to help educate newbies. So a whole host of different things. And after the 6-month grant had finished, I was also given an opportunity to join the Square Crypto team full time, which was super exciting for me and an amazing transition. So seeing what it's like to be a grantee who had never contributed to open source or Bitcoin specifically before, to now kind of being on the other side and trying to look for talent and look for projects that are going to help move our ecosystem forward. And so in terms of what we currently do, we're kind of looking after around 25 designers and developers from 17 different countries. And that's something that we're super proud about and something we want to continue. But we also see the opportunity to fund projects and developers in perhaps underserved regions of the world, and perhaps regions that we haven't quite paid as much attention to, as well as those opportunities to help fund projects that are trying to educate the next set of designers and developers and kind of help build a pipeline for the ecosystem going forward as well.
Very nice. And Beth, I don't think people quite realize like how much you've seen in and around Bitcoin over the last few years. Could you give us a little bit of your Bitcoin history, and then maybe you could describe what the Gemini Opportunity Fund is and why you took the job to lead it?
Sure. There's a lot of great content in Ben Mesrick's Bitcoin Billionaires, but and there's a lot we could talk about. But I joined Winklevoss Capital in February of 2013. At that time, I think Bitcoin was worth $15, and I was getting my blockchain.info wallet set up because it was the only wallet, that you could use at the time, or one of few options at the time. And this was pre-Gemini, so. Today, fast forward 2021, we have 500 plus employees. I joined Cameron and Tyler in the early days as their chief of staff through that hypergrowth phase. And recently they were on the podcast with Peter McCormick, where he inquired, hey, what's Gemini doing to support this ecosystem? And that was kind of the birthing moment of Gemini Opportunity Fund, which has been a great opportunity for me to run at. Being that I worked so closely with Cameron and Tyler in those early days, I often get tapped for some of these special projects that don't fall under one team or one division at the company. So it's been a true pleasure to run at this, and we've now funded over $1.5 million worth of projects or developers directly. So it's a donor advised fund where we donate to nonprofits or directly to developers and grant specific projects as well.
Great. And Hong, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the criteria or framework that you use to choose which projects to support or which people to support?
Sure, yeah. So the way we think about our developer program, the number one principle is that we want to make sure our developer program is independent, i.e. whenever we provide that support to either individuals or protocol or project, those support comes with no strings attached. We want to make sure that any sponsorship out there has no corporate agenda attached. I think that is the foremost important thing when it comes to supporting Bitcoin developer. Internally, when we think about where to put our resources, there are three key things that we are looking for in terms of investment. Number one is, we tend to like either projects or individual developers who contribute to the protocol, i.e. building privacy, contributing to security, which we think are super important long-term for a Bitcoin ecosystem. Second thing that we would like to invest in are promoting adoption of Bitcoin, either in terms of specific projects like BTC Pay that we supported for a year, that's promoting the payment side of the system, or mobile adoption of Bitcoin, or Lightning, the second layer building of within the ecosystem. And the last thing that we feel very passionate about, and we generally look for those type of characteristics when picking our sponsored recipients, are individuals or projects who are contributing to the building of the ecosystem, i.e. some of our sponsors are really strong at participating in PR, which we think are a major bottleneck in the ecosystem. One of our most recent recipient, Marco, is a core maintainer, which we also think that is super critical to the ecosystem, but is kind of undervalued to some extent. Some of our recipients are also very big advocate of mentorship, i.e. building that mentorship and helping other developers who want to be developers to kind of really understand what's going on and learn how to be part of the ecosystem, either in a more formal situation like Brink, or in a more informal situation like what Amity has been doing. So we feel very strong about those kind of initiatives where people or individuals who are making contribution to those areas. So those three are generally the key themes or areas that we try to prioritize our investments in. Obviously, Square Crypto are doing a lot of great things that we would like to partner with them. Chain Code is also doing a lot of things that we have been learning a lot from you guys in screening those candidates. But mostly those three areas are what we're looking for.
Yeah, and let me add that thankfully Chain Code isn't really in the grant business, so we've offloaded all the hard work to you all. Maybe the same question to you, Beth. You've been doing this a little not as long as maybe the other folks on the call. So how have you sort of thought about the criteria and the frameworks that you use?
Yeah, so we just launched in December of this past year. So we are definitely early on this process and so thankful for our first 3 devs that we've sponsored, Amiti, Dhruv, and Harold, who are working through the kinks with us as we build this out. But really we focus on 3 specific areas. So one is those sponsorships direct to the core developers. Secondly, we partner with foundations such as Brink, as Hong mentioned, and Human Rights Foundation. All of those folks are doing such a great job of creating this ecosystem and continuing the development of the pipeline for additional developers to get on board and work on this. So that we're very grateful for that connection. And then also to specific grants. We recently sent a small grant, which hopefully made an impact to a few different developers working on a Mac Mini project. So just making that small grant, it's a little non-traditional, but it helps go a long way so that these, the funding can make it to these incredibly talented developers that are working on really interesting projects. So those are kind of the 3 funding mechanisms that we approach this, and we really lean on the community. It's such an incredible community, an approachable community, and Chain Code and you, Jonas, have been such a huge help for us as well. So that's kind of our approach. And if there's any projects or opportunities, folks can reach out to opportunityfund@gemini.com. And I work closely with Rich Smith on our security team at Gemini, as well as my dev counterparts to assess these projects and opportunities.
Connor, now that you're sort of on the other side of the table, how are you thinking about measuring the impact? Like, how do you figure, one project versus another project, just like what kind of long-term impact it might have?
Yeah, so I think the nature of open source work means everything is kind of transparent, everything's in the open, everything is verifiable. And so we can kind of get a general sense of how a project's doing, how a team's doing, how an individual's doing by using tools such as GitHub, watching conversation, tracking issues, seeing what gets merged, seeing where there's consensus on things, seeing where there's maybe a bit of friction, and kind of just understanding at a more general level. But we also lean quite heavily on the communities as well and see like what are the community's response to the grantees? Is there like a general consensus that this person or this team is contributing positively to the project and the ecosystem as a whole? And I think ultimately we want the grantees to be happy, and we want them to be excited to work in the space as well. So we'll very occasionally check in on them and see if they need any additional support, or if things are going smoothly, like what we can do to kind of help them maintain that. Some grantees are really good at kind of documenting their work in some type of diary fashion, whether it be like a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly report type things. That is by no means necessary if like someone was to take on a Square Crypto grant, but it is nice sometimes to have a more formalized way of kind of understanding someone's progress. But I think it's a combination of all of those things that I've described to kind of get a nice overview of how projects going and how it's sort of moving forward.
Great. I guess I have the question of giving grants is just not normal for a for-profit company. And so maybe for Hong and Beth, like how do you get this through legal? Like how do you convince an organization that this is something that you can, that is worth doing, and sort of how do you actually make a company understand this?
There is no legal process or any other internal. I'm talking about what we have been through at Dogecoin, and not trying to speak for Beth. Beth will obviously have her perspective. It's not something that we went through a process for, because there's no ROI that we're solving for here that it's related to corporate agenda. We know that we need to do this. We want to do this. And the only thing that I think worried us a little bit upfront was how we make the judgment call where to allocate our money. And luckily, we have Jonas, you and your team and the community and Square Crypto to help us with that. As long as we figure that out, we feel pretty comfortable. And I think when we think about ROI, it's more about making sure that there are actually more than us, more than who has already been in the space to support it, because we know it's important, it's critical.
Well, let me change the question a little bit for you then. How do you budget this?
We set aside some budget based on our own revenue and what we can afford to do on an annual basis. So right now we have we are allocating $500,000 a year to do that. Maybe later on when we grow bigger, we can do more on an annual basis, but this is what we currently have.
Great. And Beth, you spun this up from scratch. What was that process like, and how did you, again, justify this across the different verticals across the org?
Yeah, well, I think to Hong's point, she's obviously the CEO of Dogecoin, and I think it makes a huge impact to have the founders or the CEOs or exec level really pushing for these efforts. So that's kind of how this came about at Gemini, as it was founder led. This was an important piece that Gemini felt the need to show up and be a part of and support the ecosystem. So and it seems it's the same way at Square Crypto. It's the CEO is leading the way as far as what's important to them. So really, we're just trying to support what's already happening in the community and just find a way to fund these projects and these people quickly and seamlessly. So that helps.
Yeah, it helps to be CEO, I guess, and or to have the CEO supportive at least. Connor, Square Crypto is a little bit different than I think that otherwise exists in the ecosystem, and well, Hong and Beth are looking for folks to fund externally, but Square Crypto has this internal team and somewhat of a partition team from Square itself. Could you tell us a little bit about that structure and maybe I think there's some obvious advantages there, but just sort of articulate sort of how it works?
Yeah, sure. So I think, yes, speaking of CEOs, there's no secret that Jack Dorsey is a big advocate of Bitcoin. And so around 2 years ago, felt the need to give back and contribute back to this platform that we're all building on, and recruited a full-time team to work on open source Bitcoin projects. So the team is made up of 4 developers, 3 product managers at this point. The focus is ultimately just to improve the Bitcoin ecosystem and help to empower individuals economically. And so it's just a way to give back to the open source community, and it's very much aligned with a kind of Square's larger goals of being interested in a more accessible global financial system for all. And so the way we kind of help to improve the Bitcoin ecosystem is through our own work and the support in the work of others, which I mentioned previously through the grant program. So our own work includes building out the LDK, the Lightning Development Kit, which is a tool designed to help applications easily integrate Lightning. We deem Lightning to be the preferred method of scaling for Bitcoin, and how we're going to make it become more accessible to everyone all over the planet, and hopefully a global currency for everyone to use on a day-to-day basis. And so we have 4 developers primarily contributing to that. And then the other side is obviously the grant program, where we fund different types of projects and individuals. But we're very much focused on mass adoption and Bitcoin becoming a global currency for all. But I'm sure there's institutions and there's companies that are going to be watching this where perhaps like a store of value proposition is more in line with their business interest. And so perhaps funding projects that are more focused on security, for example, might align more with what that institution is doing. And so regardless, it's just important to kind of get involved, lean on the kind of companies that have already found their mark in contributing in this way in the space, and ultimately just help improve and move the ecosystem forward as a community.
Beth, has there been anything that's been really surprising from the last few months of spinning up this program and getting to know the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think from a positive perspective, I mentioned this before, but the community has been so approachable and willing to help out, to put you in touch with different devs or different projects that are going on. So that's been really refreshing, I think, because you don't necessarily see that in all industries or all communities. So I've really been grateful for that. I would say we definitely have some work to do when it comes to the administrative efforts of onboarding devs or projects or getting the funding to them as quickly as possible. Obviously, Bitcoin was created to solve that specific problem for the world, and I think we have some work to do there. But we're working through the kinks, and I think we'll be in a better place soon. But the basics of sponsoring a dev, for example, there's some open source tools out there, but I think we can continue to open up the ecosystem and help other exchanges or other companies have kind of a blueprint of how to do this quickly and seamlessly to get more funding to these projects.
And Hong, as a global leader for an exchange, what's sort of the most misunderstood aspect of supporting this free open source Bitcoin development? I mean, do you get questions from other leaders who are interested? Like, how do you sort of speak with them about it?
Yeah, I think the two takeaways that we've got over the last 2 years are, number one, when we support individual developers and projects, we also realize that those efforts are extremely hard to scale because finding those individuals and projects take time and take a lot of community input. And at the same time, the Bitcoin developer community also in itself has a lot of bottleneck that need help externally to work through. For example, PR bottleneck and maintaining work. Those are things that we hope that we can do a little bit more work together with the community to figure out how we can actually help and make the overall supporting work more scalable. And then the second thing that surprised us a little bit actually was a recent survey that we did with our customers, with our own customers, about developer sponsorship. And it turns out that actually 80% of those who have been surveyed actually don't know how a Bitcoin developer is being supported. 30% thought that actually they were paid when Bitcoin transaction happens naturally. And then another 30% think that miners actually pay them, which would have been nice. But once they realize that actually the Bitcoin developers actually work on themselves and they need to find their own financial support or just allocate their time part-time to this work, then most of them, 80% of them actually are willing to participate in this in one way or the other. So I think that raising that level of awareness in general would be quite helpful to the ecosystem. So those two are kind of surprising to us over the last two years journey here.
And Connor, I guess how do we make sure that this grant program and this kind of support remains decentralized? We don't want people ask Chain Code all the time, when are we opening an office in X country or X continent? And it's not going to happen. But how do you think about decentralizing the funding and support for these devs and other contributors?
Yeah, so I think companies and institutions just have to get involved. I think they all have, a vested interest in seeing the success of Bitcoin, and the more you contribute, whether it be through funding or through development, design, whatever it might be, increases that probability of success. And Bitcoin is something that's going to keep improving over time, and there isn't just sort of one way to contribute. At Square Crypto we have the grant program. Chain Code looks at a more educational approach. The Human Rights Foundation and Brink take a slightly different approach as well. So if we can just continue on in that vein of having more and more organizations contributing in the way they see fit, leaning on current organizations that are already in the space, and if we can get to, I don't want to pull a number out here, but 25, 50, 100 organizations all contributing in different ways, to me that feels like a good place to be in. So it's a long journey, but I think we can get there, and we're starting to see lots of different types of organizations show the enthusiasm to want to contribute. So that's the main thing. So just get involved is the kind of TLDR, really.
And in that vein, and I think as the closing question, we'll go around the horn here. Beth, can you tell us maybe what you would suggest for an organization that's interested in getting involved?
Yeah, I think to Connor's point, get involved, tap the network. Like I said earlier, everyone seems to be pretty approachable in this community. So reach out, to the folks at Brink or at Chain Code. Maybe you can give them your email, Jonas, and reach out and connect. That's how I started. That's how I got educated. I'm still learning every day, and I think it's a really, really great group of people that will help push you in the right direction wherever you need to go.
Hong, same question to you.
Yeah, I would echo the rest of the panelists. My DM is open too, and I've got a lot of support and help from you, Jonas, and the rest of the community. So we're here to help. And by the way, this is the area where we actually see exchanges partner up, right? We have partnered up with other exchanges previously on sponsoring, and Amity now goes to Gemini too. So this is an area for everyone to really help help us grow long term, because we really need to invest in the foundation, invest in the fundamentals of the industry, so that it's not a bubble by the end of the day. So just get into it.
Connor, close us out.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add, but I'd say, identify kind of where you'd want to contribute, because there's so many different areas to contribute. Maybe start there and identify what it is and what area you want to contribute to. And like the panelists have said, the people working in the Bitcoin ecosystem are ever so lovely and ever so friendly. And so we'd love to kind of hear from you and help in any way we can, really.
Well, thank you all for your thoughts. And I think echoing the sentiments of everyone here, we'd love you to get involved. Please do reach out. It shouldn't be too hard to track us down. So thank you all for joining. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yassine. I cover Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies at ARK Invest, and I have the pleasure of introducing the call to action panel of the Supporting the Developer Ecosystem track. So in this track, we've laid out the developer landscape, we've explained why funding Bitcoin is a challenging task, and highlighted what individuals and organizations are doing to support the ecosystem. To wrap it up, we're going to hear from 3 initiatives actively supporting the developer ecosystem. We'll start with Mike Schmidt, co-founder and director of programs at Bitcoin Brink, a nonprofit organization that exists to strengthen the Bitcoin protocol by supporting and mentoring new contributors to open source Bitcoin development through its fellowship program and supporting the work of established Bitcoin protocol engineers through its grants program. We'll then move on to Neha Narula, director of the Digital Currency Initiative at MIT, who will explain the importance of funding Bitcoin security research and share a new initiative within MIT DCI designed to continue to harden the Bitcoin network and steward the industry's commitment to funding open source software. And then finally, we'll hear from Alex Gladstein, Chief Strategy Officer at the Human Rights Foundation, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that promotes and protects human rights globally. Alex will
co-founder at Brink. Brink is a not-for-profit we formed in 2020, and our explicit goal is to support the Bitcoin developer community through funding, education, and mentoring. We have 2 different programs. We have a traditional grant-style program where we fund existing Bitcoin developers, and we also have a more novel fellowship program that is a 1-year in-person training program to onboard new Bitcoin developers. As everybody knows, Bitcoin development is notoriously difficult and development talent is scarce. And so this fellowship program, we think, will help onboard new promising developers to the projects. So why Brink? Well, we're a 501c3 organization, which means all donations to Brink are tax deductible. And due to some generous sponsorship provided by our founding sponsors, 100% of the donations go to our grantees and fellows. And all of our administrative and upfront and administrative costs are taken care of. We're funded entirely from individuals and organizations that are looking to support the ecosystem. The service that we provide our partners and our sponsors are turnkey in that Brink finds, vets, and mentors developers. We also handle all of the administration, the legal, the visa, and other requirements for donations. And also any sort of travel logistics or travel related expenses in getting fellows to our office in London. And we're exclusively focused on the Bitcoin and Lightning ecosystems. We have a strong track record in terms of individuals on our team. We have hands-on Bitcoin core development experience in-house. And we also have years of mentorship, training, workshop, and educational resources specifically in the Bitcoin space. A little bit more about our team and our backgrounds. So my co-founder, John Newberry, he's a core contributor since 2016. He also co-founded Bitcoin OpTech, which is an educational resource for developers and folks in the ecosystem. He started he worked on the chain code residency. He founded the Bitcoin Devs Meetup in New York, and he's also the PR Review Club organizer. Myself, I'm a contributor to the OpTech newsletter, and I also organize and present at various workshops and events in the ecosystem. Anthony Hodge has worked since 2014 at cryptocurrency nonprofits, and she heads up our operations efforts. And on the board, we have Dave Harding. Dave's a prolific Bitcoin technical writer and educator. He co-wrote the Bitcoin.org developer documentation back in 2014 and 2015. And he's also the principal author of the Bitcoin OpTech newsletter. Jerry Burrito is executive director of Coin Center, and he's testified several times in Congress, and he's been published in the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy, Stanford Technology Law Review, as well as Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. And Carla is a software engineer at Lightning Labs, and she works on the LND Lightning Network implementation and also associated infrastructure projects. She was a resident at the Chain Code 2019 residency, and she brings Lightning expertise to our board. So along with myself and John, Dave, Jerry, and Carla make up the Brink board. So with our strong team that we've put together, also a stellar grants program. Our grants program is targeted to be long-term. Long-term grants are more sustainable for the developer versus piecemeal, sporadic donations that happen maybe online, can fund a developer for a month, and then they don't know where their funding is at for the next month. So we're targeting those long-term grants to allow the grantees to really focus on Bitcoin and related development work full-time. They're also independent grants in that a developer can work on whatever they choose to work on within their expertise, and they're not being told what to do or necessarily how to do it by Brink. As mentioned previously, we have a strong technical and experienced grant committee that's made up of the same board members that I mentioned previously. And so we're vetting the best and most impactful projects and developers in the space that will have the biggest contribution. We funded Jesse, who is an ex-Coinbase alum, and he's working on key management. Alikos is working on Bitcoin Development Kit, which is a kit for wallets to more easily implement Bitcoin into their wallet software. Habasto is one of the most prolific Bitcoin Core developers. He has a ton of Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin GUI commits. And we've also just recently announced Larry and Sebastian as our second round of grantees, and they're focused on code review and testing. For more promising but less experienced developers, we have the fellowship program. And that fellowship program is a year-long focus on Bitcoin development, and it's on-site in our office in London, and mentored by my co-founder and longtime Bitcoin developer, John Newberry. And it builds on his experience organizing the Chain Code residencies and also mentoring new contributors over the years and running the PR Review Club. And there's a few different organizations that are doing traditional grants, but we really think that this fellowship is completely unique to the industry and furthers onboarding new talent to the ecosystem. Right now we have Gloria Zhao, who's actually in London and has been there for a couple months, already contributing very valuable work under her package relay efforts. And we've just now have a second fellow whose contract is just recently signed and we have not yet announced, and this person hasn't started yet, but we're excited to announce soon. None of this fellowship work or grant work would be possible without contributions from our founding sponsors. Entrepreneur Wences Casares and investor John Pfeffer, who contributed initial funds to get us off the ground and fund us for the first few years in terms of our operational and legal expenses and upfront expenses. So we thank them because it's their faith in us, but more importantly, their belief in the value of investing in developers that got us where we are today. And so where are we today? Where is Brink today? Well, Brink has $3 million pledged in just over 9 months of operation. And as we've seen, we've already funded 5 grantees and 2 fellows. And while we're all very happy about that and the money that we've received, we think we're just getting started. So who's contributing so far? Well, we're happy to have some of the biggest companies in the industry contributing to our mission and donating for our grants and our fellowship programs. In addition to these names that you see on the screen, we also have donations from smaller organizations and individuals who have donated as well. So if you're interested in what we're working on and what we're trying to achieve here, feel free to subscribe to our Brink email newsletter, where we talk about what our fellows are working on, what our grantees are working on. We announce new rounds of grants recipients and fellow recipients and keep everybody updated with the development ecosystem. Likewise, you can follow Bitcoin Brink on Twitter, where we have similar updates. Feel free to reach out, donate at brink.dev to chat about how we can partner together to further the development ecosystem and fund additional projects and developers in the space. We also accept online donations on our website, brink.dev. And because we're a 501c3 organization, we are also eligible to be listed under donor advised funds. And so if you don't see Brink listed under your donor advised fund, feel free to reach out and we can discuss that as well. Thank you for your time and consideration, and we hope to hear from you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Neha Narula, and I am the director of the Digital Currency Initiative, which is based out of the MIT Media Lab. So what is the Digital Currency Initiative? We engage in Bitcoin and digital currency research and development. We're housed at MIT, and we primarily focus on unsolved challenges in security, scalability, and privacy. So I want to talk about digital currency and where we are for a second. It's not done. We're not done building Bitcoin. There's still a tremendous amount of work to do, and there's still really fundamental challenges that we need to solve in order to do that work. And part of what we do at the DCI is engage in the deep research to get that done. So why MIT DCI? There's so many organizations you're going to hear about that support Bitcoin and Bitcoin development. Well, we're really here to address some of the fundamental digital currency challenges by conducting long-term research. We have been around since 2015, and we've been supporting senior Bitcoin developers since then. So we are a neutral long-term home for senior developers. And we're also in a unique position to leverage the MIT ecosystem of experts in economics, security, distributed systems, cryptography, and more. Our mission is to empower individuals by making it as fast and easy to move value across the world as it is to move information. And surprisingly, that does not mean we just work on Bitcoin. So in 2015 and 2016, we hired 3 important core maintainers and developers, including the lead maintainer. And MIT became the first university to employ core developers and to really put its stamp on Bitcoin as a research-worthy, important protocol. In addition to that, we started doing some work on central bank digital currency research in 2016. In the intervening years, we have worked on really important projects like bringing smart contracts to Bitcoin, disclosing vulnerabilities, publishing ideas that can help scale running Bitcoin nodes, implementing really important monitoring to make sure that the Bitcoin system is running the way that it's supposed to be running. But in addition to that, we are in a unique position to talk to governments and lawmakers and other folks in the public sector to help explain the technology and work with them to understand digital currency better. And what we're doing this year is we're actually launching something completely new, which is focused entirely on Bitcoin security. So let me tell you a little bit about why we're focusing on Bitcoin security. So Bitcoin, like I said, is not done. It has some really unique properties that make solving challenges in Bitcoin pretty hard. So first of all, it's 24/7 global access for everyone. Anyone can join the network, anyone can start mining, anyone can go and look at the code, which is posted online. There's no undo or rollback. There's no system administrator or master key holder. So if something goes wrong, there's nobody who can go get your coins for you. That's just a done deal. This is decentralized, open source software. That means that there isn't really a leader or a manager. There isn't a roadmap that the developers are necessarily following. This is all done in a decentralized manner. And then to add to that, attacks are easily monetizable. So attackers can almost anonymously make off with a lot of value in certain situations. So when you put all 4 of these things together, you are in an incredibly challenging adversarial environment. And that's the environment that developers are working in. And that's the environment where we need to address issues like privacy, security, and scalability. And what we're seeing now is that Bitcoin is entering a new era, an entirely new era. It recently surpassed $1 trillion market cap before coming back down. There's a very big upcoming shift that's going to happen in a few months and years, which is going to be a big change in the network security and economics around Bitcoin. That's the transition from block rewards to transaction fees as the primary way of rewarding miners. In addition to that, We have a very passionate group of volunteer developers and distributed organizations which fund full-time developers, and we have a really healthy grants ecosystem, which is fantastic. But I would argue that that's not going to get us where we need to go. We really need to think about implementing long-term processes and long-term thinking and long-term homes. It almost requires the amount of time it takes to get a PhD to get really up to speed in Bitcoin. There are very few people around the world who are able to do solid code review and to really understand all the intricacies of the network. And we need to think about putting processes in place to continue to build that capacity and create more of these people and make sure that they have a home. So that's why we are starting this security initiative. We have the following goals. First of all, we want to maintain a long-term senior team. So we're trying to build out a senior team of developers and research scientists and provide a long-term home for these people. In addition to that, we want to focus on work that is really going to find and prevent layer 1 bugs. So things like removing risky code dependencies and researching safer programming languages. We want to investigate, monitor, and deter. So that involves things like conducting code audits and researching the long-term economic security of Bitcoin. And finally, we need to improve automation. We need to decrease reliance on scarce experts and also identify and circulate best practices. So these 4 things are a big part of the security initiative that we are launching at MIT. We already have a lot of really great contributors, but we are looking for more. So this is an excellent opportunity if you want to make an investment in the long-term success of Bitcoin. Our goal here is to help bring Bitcoin's global security infrastructure up to par with a system that is actually capable of guarding a $1 trillion market no matter what is thrown at it. So I want to tell you a little bit about some of the folks that we have at DCI. In addition to myself, we also have Vladimir Vanderlaan, who is a Bitcoin Core developer and has been the lead maintainer for over 5 years. Taj Dryja, who's a research scientist. He's a co-inventor of the main scaling solution for Bitcoin, the Lightning Network, and is doing a lot of really important work bringing smart contracts on top of Bitcoin. Corey Fields, another longtime Bitcoin Core developer, his expertise is in the build systems and peer-to-peer networks and security. And Madars Virza, he's a research scientist with a PhD in cryptography from MIT. He's a co-author of the Zero Cash paper, which was the predecessor to Zcash, the cryptocurrency, and has done a ton of work in zero knowledge proofs. So that's the current DCI technical team. We're looking to expand this team to build out the security initiative. But being at MIT, it's not just technical leaders. We also have an amazing group of advisors drawing on the MIT ecosystem. So that includes folks from Sloan, like Simon Johnson, former chief economist of the IMF, Rob Townsend, an economist, Ron Rivest, who invented a lot of the really important cryptography that we're using in these systems today, and Deb Roy, who does work in decentralized networks and is a leader at the Media Lab. We were really lucky to have some core important people in the ecosystem as part of our advisory board while they were at MIT as well. That includes the current chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Gary Gensler. We're sorry to lose him, but he's a former advisor at DCI, and Christian Catalini, who is one of the co-creators of Facebook's Diem. So those are former advisors at DCI. We're really lucky to be in a place as vibrant and exciting at MIT, where we get to work on Bitcoin and bring students and faculty and researchers into our world, help share with them some of the really fundamental problems that we're going to need to solve in order to bring Bitcoin to the next level. If you are interested in supporting our work, here's how you can get involved. You can go to our website, dci.mit.edu, which will show you how to donate and become a part of our network. You can send us an email at dci@media.mit.edu. We host regular roundtables on Bitcoin security, where we bring developers together with investors to share insights about what is happening inside the Bitcoin network and where things are going. So we would love for you to be a part of that as well. So thank you very much.
Hey everyone, my name is Alex Gladstein. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of the Human Rights Foundation. Very happy to be with you today and want to take a moment to talk a little bit about our Bitcoin Development Fund and how we can help push for more open source development and creativity and innovation in the Bitcoin space. The Human Rights Foundation is a nonprofit based in New York City, founded in 2005. Our goal is to promote civil liberties and political rights around the world, especially for people who live under authoritarian regimes. Today, about 4.3 billion people across 95 countries live under different kinds of authoritarian regimes where they don't have the same rights and privileges that we may have in a country like America. And at HRF, our programs range from legal defense and advocacy for political prisoners to conferences like the Oslo Freedom Forum that bring dissidents and journalists and activists together with people from different industries to make a bigger dent in the fight for freedom, to technology programs like flash drives for freedom, which actually help outside information get into closed societies like North Korea, where people don't have access to the internet. We're led by a board of esteemed international human rights advocates like Garry Kasparov and former political prisoners from many countries. And our work has an impact annually of reaching many, many millions of people around the world. Now, we do this in a couple different ways. First of all, we have this idea of partnering directly with activists on the ground, so that we're basically supporting innovators who kind of indigenously know what they're doing. We're not coming in with like a big outside idea. We're listening to what they have to say, and we're trying to support them in that particular way. And we give them the stage. We give them grants. We seek to figure out what works best in different places, and then support that from however we can. And we've always had a strategy of relying on technology to do so, whether it be training activists on how to stay safe online, or as we'll get into, learning about the power of Bitcoin. The important thing to understand is that Bitcoin is very closely tied to human rights. Hundreds of millions of people around the world suffer from closed bank accounts, devaluation, demonetization, censored payments, financial isolation, broken infrastructure. They don't have a lot of the fintech that we have. They don't have a lot of the rights and abilities that we have, and it's often hard for them to actually store their value and time and money in a money that's going to preserve value, whether it's over time or space. These things are not really accessible to many, many people. So Bitcoin's a game changer. It is, as you've probably been learning, this open network that allows anyone to connect, that provides bridges and not walls, and that allows for the instant transfer of value in a totally parallel way to the existing legacy system. And this is just so important for like the billions of people who live under authoritarian regimes, or for the 1.2 billion people who live under double or triple digit inflationary environments. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is this just like remarkable empowerment tool. So the question is, how do we activate that, right? Well, we've chosen to focus on three areas at the Human Rights Foundation. First of all, public education. So we do a lot of talks like these. We do a lot of writing. We do a lot of podcasts. We do a lot of presentations at conferences. We try to really get the word out about, this sort of the human rights implication of Bitcoin. The second thing we do are trainings. So we will actually run, whether they be virtual or in person, workshops and academies to help activists learn about Bitcoin if they wish. Of course, it's a voluntary system, but if they need it, we want them to understand how to use this tool because it can be very powerful. And the third thing that we do is most relevant to us today, and that's support the open source Bitcoin ecosystem. And that we do that through the Bitcoin Development Fund, which we launched about a year ago in June of 2020, mainly to do what we can from our side to contribute to Bitcoin to make it a better tool for human rights activists. I mean, that is our primary goal. We want to make this thing more usable, more private, more decentralized, more accessible. We've given out a bunch of grants so far, totaling north of $750,000 over the last year. Some of the recipients are working on Bitcoin Core, like Gloria Zhao, for example. Some of them are working on new privacy implementations, like Chris Belcher. Some of them are working on the Lightning Network, maybe someone like Fode Diop. Some of them are doing translation into different languages, like Arabic Hodl. Some of them are even just doing general education about the space, like Janine, or contributing from different places around the world, like Calvin, who's a Bitcoin Core contributor from Korea. If we look at other examples, we're supporting also teams. The Spectre team is making multi-sig a lot easier for a lot of people. Sphinx is empowering people to communicate on a social media platform that's powered by Lightning. And the Moon Wallet is a remarkable open source, non-KYC, sort of non-custodial wallet built by a team in Argentina that we're very, very happy to support. We've also done some internships with Blockchain Commons so that college students can contribute to Bitcoin and actually help onboard activists, which we think is quite exciting. And again, just with our global focus and our background, we feel like we want to give back, especially to societies that are facing a struggle right now when it comes to civil and political rights. So we're delighted to support core developers like Abu Bakr in Nigeria and Dhruv, who's from India. Our future plans are to continue doing this, probably this year with a heavy focus on UX and on Lightning. I mean, we really believe that the Lightning network is really going to be a game changer for people living under authoritarian societies worldwide or in difficult currency situations. A lot of folks need to make small payments. I mean, they need to make a $5 payment, a $10 payment. So in the future, that just won't really be that feasible on chain. So it's very important that we have easy onboarding into Lightning, that we have best practices when it comes to privacy, protecting our identities. These things are all much more important for people living under authoritarian regimes, obviously. So you can follow our work at href.org/devfund. And the other big thing that we're doing that's coming up is along the lines of the training that I spoke about, the education, the connections. So at the Oslo Freedom Forum, our annual event, this will take place in Miami on October 4th and 5th. We're going to have a full day in a theater, kind of TED Talk style. We're also going to have a whole interactive day with actually a full-scale kind of Bitcoin Academy, which is going to be a place where activists and journalists and philanthropists and technologists can learn more about Bitcoin from world experts. And we're going to go through a whole day of thinking about what is Bitcoin, why is it important, how do I use it? We're going to have a faucet. We're going to help people get involved. We're going to talk about Lightning, multi-sig. We're going to talk about how to spend your Bitcoin on services like Bitrefill or Paxful. We're going to talk about receiving donations and remittances through things like BTC Pay Server or Strike. We're going to talk about who controls Bitcoin and how does it work in that sense from a political angle. That's always very interesting to activists. We're going to talk about the political backstory of the cypherpunks and Satoshi, and we're going to explore the political nature of Bitcoin. We're gonna look into Bitcoin mining and try to help explain why it's actually quite important and critical for the Bitcoin system. And we're also going to talk about building communities. We're going to have folks from Bitcoin Beach come and talk about what they did down there in El Salvador, which is obviously so world changing. So we're excited. These are some of the educators and stakeholders and developers that are going to join us. Some of the teams that'll be down there. I think it's going to be a great program. So you can learn more at oslofreedomforum.com. And to apply to join us today. Thanks very much. I appreciate your time. We are excited to contribute to Bitcoin from the human rights angle. We realize we're probably the first human rights group to do this. We want to see a lot more human rights groups get involved because ultimately that's what this thing is. It's a powerful tool for human rights. And thanks again.
Bitcoin, that there's 21 million coins and it's going to be issued at a certain schedule, that if you store your funds on the blockchain